Human nature compels us to avoid our feelings. But what if you sit with them instead? Every time we feel discomfort, we seek a means to distract ourselves from it, or seek some sort of cure to prevent us from feeling that way. But what happens when we sit with how we feel and we try to understand it? For so long, I've chased an escape from a reality that I didn't like, a reality that I kind of imposed upon myself with what I believed in. Now, I believed those things because I believed in the reasons for those things existing. These problems I created for myself at the time, I 100% believed in. And although those things were true, I didn't have to choose to believe in them. Because I was a smart kid, I could always recognize patterns and understand people from a very young age. And so because of these understandings and the trust I had in my own viewpoint, I didn't like the reality I was presented with. But we have the ability to choose what we believe in. I'm sure most of you have heard of placebo, like a medication that does nothing, but because you're convinced that it does something, it actually cures some sort of symptoms of yours. So if we have the ability to convince ourselves that a medication that in reality does nothing, but because we believe in it, it cures something in us, how far could we take that ability? How far could we change our reality by choosing what to believe in? I'm thinking we could turn our whole world upside down by choosing what to believe in. I believe that nothing happens for no reason. Everything happens for a reason, better way to put it. Every negative thing I've ever experienced in life, I have always perceived it as something good. Something that I may not understand in the moment, but something that's going to help me in the future. A way that I used to put it, especially in high school when I was doing dumb stuff and hella anxious about things because of my decisions, I always thought, when I have a child one day, if my child experiences any of these things, at the very least, because I'm experiencing them now, I'll be able to help my child through the same thing. And that doesn't just stop at your children. That could be a friend, that could be a family member, coworker. Every negative thing you experience in life could be used as a way to help somebody else in the future. At our worst moments, we'd like to believe that, there's nothing left, we're at rock bottom. How could we ever get out of this? I know, with experiencing anxiety, I'm sure you, the viewer, has experienced this as well. Sometimes we get so overwhelmed that we don't believe that there's a way out. And, it is naive in the moment, but it's true. In those moments of suffering, absolute mental agony, we believe that there's no hope and that this is it. This panic attack is the last one I'll ever have, and it'll be it. Maybe life would be easier if that were true. But life wouldn't be easier, it would just be over. And do you want your last moments on this earth to be in a state of pure fear and non-understanding? Probably not. If you're anything like me, you'd probably want to understand everything. I've wished for and prayed for the ability to understand all of the negative things that I've gone through in my life. You know, people when they ask like, what's your number one wish? If you had 3 wishes, what would your wishes be? And you know, the first thing I always thought of was I wish to understand why I had to suffer so much. I wish to understand my suffering. And I think I understand now. I think I understand that suffering is an opportunity to learn. To learn about yourself, to learn about others, to learn about your creator, to learn about behavior. You know, we don't have to let suffering be the end all be all. Many of us have made it out of those panic attacks and been fine. Many of us have moved on far beyond our worst moments. But I'd like to bring us back to those moments of hopelessness. You know, we believed in those moments that we were doomed. But in reality, we weren't. But that feeling that we gave ourselves because of that strong belief, you know, it definitely affected us deeply in those moments. What if you take that belief and you believe in good? You believe in the best possible outcome. You believe that none of your suffering happens for no reason. You believe that everything you go through has some sort of silver lining and we can learn from it. You start to understand your surroundings more. You start to understand life a little more. Life isn't just about satisfying your needs or distracting yourself from your feelings. Life is about understanding. No wonder my biggest wish and my biggest prayer was to understand. Because at the center of my soul, I feel like that's all we humans really want. We want to understand and we want to be understood. And I'm starting to understand. No matter how much I go through, no matter what I experience, it's all for a good reason. And I'm going to choose to believe in that. Why would I choose otherwise? I would only be hurting myself. I would only be digging a hole for myself to crawl into, to expire in. And that's just not worth it. I mean, society expects you to do that. A lot of our family members and parents expect you to wallow in self-pity, to be disappointed in yourself if you don't meet the status quo, or if you don't develop as strong or as fast as others. But life isn't about comparing yourself to others. Not a single person on this world is the same. Everybody is different. And with that comes different growth rates, different IQ levels, different strengths, different weaknesses. And that's an undisputable fact. So to allow people to compare you to others or to compare yourself to others is ridiculous. You know, many of you and me, I've done it my whole life. I've compared myself countless times to people that were in positions that I wanted to be in, people who had strengths that I wanted to have, who didn't have the weaknesses that I had. But there comes a point in your maturity where you realize that these strengths and weaknesses, they can be worked on. They can be trained. You don't have to be the person that you felt like you were always supposed to be. You can be whoever you decide to be. And you don't have to let anybody hold you back. Some people like me had like nice guy syndrome where like, you always said please and thank you, and you kind of just let anybody do whatever they wanted. And you didn't cause problems, you were non-confrontational. And that leads you down a dark path. Because the longer you allow people to disrespect you and to treat you differently because of your viewpoints, and you don't stand up for yourself, you're allowing that poor innocent soul of yours to be bullied relentlessly. And that begins to affect the way you feel about yourself. You begin to have a bad relationship with yourself. And if all we truly have in this world is ourselves, why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we allow this type of behavior to bring us down? Don't stand for it. Do whatever in your power to get yourself out of that situation. Because it's not going to get better until you work on it. I used to like wait for God or pray for something to change. And although there are outside factors that change, the true changing that needed to happen was in here. I needed to change how I responded to negativity, how I responded to problems in my life. And when I started to change my habitual responses, I started to gain control over myself again. I started to decide what I'm going to do, what I'm going to put up with, what I'm going to like, what I'm going to dislike, and what I'm going to allow to affect me and what I'm not going to allow. And my quality of life has improved 100 times. I was extremely depressed, extremely. And now I feel like depression can't even touch me. Anxiety can't even touch me. I'm experiencing some health issues at the moment. Do I know what's wrong? No. Do I worry? No. Everything happens for a reason. I used to be deathly afraid of needles. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, some people probably have the same feeling. You would just get so anxious, and it was like a weird, psychological thing where you're just like, I don't want that inside me. I got blood work done today for a medical procedure I have scheduled next week. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that needle. I didn't allow myself to be afraid of it. I watched it go in. I conquered my fear. And I'm not even afraid for my procedure either. Why? Because I won't allow myself to be. I'm not going to allow myself to experience a negative reality when I am in full control of how I experience things. So what I want to leave you guys with today is work on yourself. Work to get to the point where you can control your reality. It's entirely possible. Entirely. Completely and utterly. I know there's even government documents that have been released around this kind of philosophy. What's the word? Where you speak things into existence. And it is true. It's true. So, work on yourself. Cut out the bad habits. Quit putting up with shit that you don't want to put up with. And fight for yourself. Fight for the things you believe in, and fight for the way that you deserve to be treated. And maybe that starts with taking care of yourself, forgiving yourself for all of your setbacks, all of your failures. You're a human. We're meant to make mistakes. Don't hold yourself accountable for those mistakes for too long, because at the end of the day, everybody makes them. And God's not going to judge you because of a mistake that you made. I promise you that.